Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and today I want to talk to you about your drawstroke. So the drawstroke is taught differently in a lot of different locations, a lot of different people, and the things that I will say about your drawstroke are twofold. Number one, your drawstroke needs to be clean, seamless, needs to be minimal as far as your movement is concerned. I find that most of the time people add steps to their drawstroke, and that's what you want to avoid. You want to keep that drawstroke nice and clean. But before we actually start talking about the mechanics of the drawstroke, we need to talk about the various conditions that I might have to draw. And there's really only four. The first type of, or the first condition would be what we call just your default drawstroke. And that's going to be whether it's open carry, concealed carry, going to the target, two-hand grip. After that, the next type of drawstroke that I would have to perform would be a strong hand only. Now, the key difference about that strong hand only is really going to be if you're concealed. If you're concealed, your defeat methodology has to be developed to where the default setting is always a one-hand defeat methodology. So that's one important point. The next part of the drawstroke, or the next condition, would be a weak hand. So for whatever reason, my strong hand is injured and I have to draw the gun with my weak hand. The last one is one that we really don't practice enough of, but is something that's super important from the concealed carry side of the house, which is a sneaky draw. So a sneaky draw is one that's kind of surreptitious in nature. You're trying to move, you're actually trying to do the opposite of what you would do with your default draw, which is actually to move slow enough to where you don't attract unwanted attention. That furtive movement is what we want to avoid. We want to do something that's a little bit more natural, slow, doesn't attract attention, that sort of thing. So let's talk, now that we have the conditions out of the way, let's talk about what are the key points of performance. So the most important thing that you have to develop is that final firing grip has to be achieved while the gun is still in the holster. As long as I have done that, a lot of the battle is going to be won, okay? So once I have that final firing grip developed inside the holster, whether I'm doing a default, strong hand, even the weak hand or my sneaky draw, that's going to be super important. After I have gotten the final firing grip, one of the things that we talk about that is often overlooked is the importance behind your contact position. So when I'm in a contact position, that position is going to be nice and high along my rib cage region here. What I want to make sure of is two things. One, I want to make sure that my thumb is nice and high. I've actually opened up my thumb. That does two things, right? Number one, when I keep my thumb nice and high, it allows me to mate two hands together and to finalize that two-hand grip as I extend a target, right? But really what this allows me to do is this creates a little bit of an offset. So if I had to go to guns from this position, contact position, my slide is somewhat protected from being impinged by my body. All right, so once I have this position high, that's going to be key. That contact position is so often overlooked simply because we're so interested in trying to get to target as fast as we possibly can that we forget that at close proximity, I may not be able to actually fully extend with both hands. So one key component to your drawstroke is that it should have as a piece of your DNA that contact position as you're drawing the gun out. What I have found is the orientation of the muzzle, there's some options that you have available. You can have that nice horizontal position, which is going to go straight into the target, but you also need to consider the possibility that if you become entangled with the opponent, that you might want to have a downward angle so that if you're entangled and you're entangled in the upper torso of the body, that you're not running the risk of shooting yourself. All right, so key things that you need to consider is what is the conditions. After that, when we talk about the weak side draw, the most important thing that we talk about for weak side draw is safety. Because the safety component to the weak side draw is one that we sometimes see kind of thrown to the wayside, and that has to do with muzzle discipline. So as you're drawing the gun out with your weak side, as you go for your weak side, one of the key things that we see is a lot of times people will draw the gun out. There's two positions that I recommend. One is going to be in between your knees. So as I pull the gun out, I'm going to put it in between my knees so that I can acquire my firing grip to go out. That's one method. The key thing that folks need to remember about that is that once I've done this, I'm immobile. I can't move, nor should I move, because if I move, I'm probably going to drop the gun. All right. So there are a couple of other techniques, but the problem with those techniques is that a lot of times we're not paying attention to where that muzzle is going. Right. So Once you have worked at this technique, because that's the hard, in my opinion, just kind of getting accustomed to moving the gun out of the holster, putting it in a position to regrip. Once you have gotten that done, and I find this one to be a little bit safer because God forbid I should have a negligent discharge doing all this, I mitigate the amount of personal injury or property damage that I could possibly expect. All right, so that's one key thing. The sneaky draw, the key thing about that sneaky draw, like I was saying, is that it's got to be kind of like slow and nonchalant, and where you're kind of like really not even making movements. But here's the thing about that sneaky draw. Where am I going with that sneaky draw? So a lot of times people think that they're going to bring the gun out nice and slow and go to target. No, what you're probably going to be doing is you're probably going to be averting your side. So if my opponent is over here, I'm blading my body so that I can get the gun out and behind me without him really seeing what I'm doing. And once I've done that, I now have the gun in my hand. So whatever draw stroke you subscribe to, it's never going to be as fast as when you have the gun already in your hand. Right? So that's one of the advantages of that sneaky draw. Obviously, that's one of those things that you've got to practice, and you've got to come up with your technique as far as how you're going to do it, how you're going to be nice and sneaky and slow speed. Have some friends watch you to figure out what's working for you, what's not working for you. All right, so again, these are the 4 conditions that we want to encourage people to start practicing. But if I had to focus on one area to be like the 85% of my time and effort, it's going to be on that default draw stroke. And then if I could, I'd probably spend a lot of time on my strong hand only after that. All right, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them down below. I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Until then, take care and stay safe.